Hello, I am Professor Kino, and welcome to my Office of Cinematic Antiquity. Today we will be talking about... When the first film of this franchise came out back in 2009, I had just recently gotten a cat, and the film resonated with me a lot because of how much Toothless, a black, adorable, temperamental, fun dragon, reminded me of my Sam, a black, adorable, temperamental, fun cat. But on top of this, the film was just an excellently written story about severing cultural and societal barriers and discovering who you are truly meant to be. And after the success of this first film, 2 sequels were soon greenlit. While I was hesitant at first, as I am with all sequels, the second How to Train Your Dragon ended up being a wonderful story that continued the franchise beautifully. So with having a sequel that was already so good, my anticipation for the third film grew more and more. And so now, 5 years later, the third and final film, How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World, is finally out. So, was the How to Train Your Dragon franchise able to stick the landing and solidify itself as a solid, worthwhile trilogy? Premise. Now that the Nordic island town of Berk has become a utopia for dragons and Vikings alike, the people of the town are forced to face one final threat in order to maintain their way of life. Consequently, Chief Hiccup makes it his mission to track down the fabled dragon homeworld, the Hidden World, in an attempt to find a safe and secret place for his people and their dragons to live. Writing. I should start by saying that I didn't think this film was too surprising or new in its story beats. Nothing ever took me off guard, and most of the time I saw the direction that the story was headed. The story was, at a foundational level, a very classic one about growing up, finding your place, and moving on. The type of story that has already been done a handful of times in animated movies of late, i.e. the Lego Movie 2 and Ralph Breaks the Internet. Additionally, I found the villain to be rather basic, just a bad guy without much to him that only serves to move the plot forward. That being said, while the whole story wasn't super unique, it was, as a whole, really effective and impactful here, and this has a lot to do with the film's main characters. They are all written really well. From Hiccup struggling to be like his father, to Astrid trying to figure out what it will mean to be queen, to Toothless having to balance his life between his friendship with Hiccup and his role as the dragon leader he was destined to be, to even the comedic reliefs having small entertaining and sometimes touching arcs. These are all characters that feel like they have grown over the course of this trilogy and are still growing here, and while they are thrust into a plot that has been seen before, it works wondrously. It is just the perfect classic-type story that fits these characters and this world to end the trilogy in a grand and satisfactory way. Because let me tell you, the last 15 minutes of this film led to audible cheers, tears being shed by everyone at my screening, child, teenager, and adult, and a lovely round of applause. Just the perfect conclusion to this wondrous set of films. Beautiful, heartfelt, and emotional in all the best ways possible. Acting. The voice work here is really good all around, particularly from the leads. Jay Baruchel makes Hiccup young and at times naive, but also respectable and resilient. It's the perfect voice for the character, that of a young leader who is still trying to figure out what type of leader and person he wants to be. Then America Ferrera as Astrid is the perfect foil to Baruchel's Hiccup, inherently and unapologetically charismatic and strong, and yet does not want anything to do with leadership. An excellent way to portray a character that is really good at what she does, but is intimidated by the prospect of becoming something more. And F. Murray Abraham as the villain Grimmel is also just as great. While Grimmel as a character is rather basic, Abraham is able to effortlessly showcase his arrogance, greed, and skill. It's effectively intimidating. And as for the supporting cast, they are all solid as well. Cate Blanchett, Gerard Butler, Jonah Hill, Christopher Mintz-Plasse, Kristen Wiig, and Kit Harington all return to sound just as good as they did in the previous films. The only replacement is Justin Ruppel, who takes over for T.J. Miller as Tough Nut. While it is a little noticeable, Ruppel does a good job at sounding like T.J. Miller's Tough Nut, but older and more mature. So since all the characters are supposed to be older, it does fit nicely. Character design. All the characters are older than we've seen them, from some slight facial hair to fuller bodies to more mature eyes. Every character looks like what you'd expect an older version of them to look like, and that is excellent. Additionally, there are some new sets of armor here that the characters wear, made of dragon scales, that look really cool, with lots of little neat details to them. And as for the dragons, they look really good as well. While the ones we have seen before, Toothless, Cloudjumper, etc. look the same, there are some newcomers that are quite creative. For example, Grimmel's dragons, with their huge tusks, crazed eyes, and drug-fueled control collars, are quite terrifying. All in all, the designs of everyone, human and dragon, are great. Set design. While a chunk of the sets are merely ships, seas, and islands, there are 2 standouts, Berk and the Hidden World. We have seen Berk in a few other films, but its progression between the 3 is spectacular. From being a fun-looking Viking village in the first film to the Viking dragon utopia it is in this film is great. There are just so many fun little details that it has in this third film that make it a really fascinating and fun town to explore, and the hidden world itself is also awesome. Colorful, vibrant, and gorgeous. It's a visual jaw-dropper. Choreography. There is a lot of creative action, and all the characters feel like they have different fighting styles and different fighting capabilities. From Astrid's aggressive physical combat to Hiccup's creative maneuvers to Valka's finesse to Fishleg's bumbling, every character feels unique and fun. And this also goes for the dragons, from their unique powers to their varying intelligence, size, and strength. All the action looks nice and is brought together with some effective choreography. Cinematography. For the most part, this film is framed really well. There are some gorgeous shots that really help to showcase some of the great sets, long, sprawling takes that capture the world's entirety, but also tighter ones that show off the many finer details. In addition, there is some great handling of action, particularly in the first big action scene. It is designed to look like one long take that passes through and around the fighting to show off all the characters working together to great effect. However, there are a couple of times the action gets a little too close frame-wise, and consequently can make it feel a little too chaotic. It doesn't happen much, but I noticed it once in a while. Besides that, everything else is good. Editing. There are some great long takes during the first action scene, for example, that look really nice. And the edits are usually done nicely enough to make the whole film feel natural. Just long enough in between edits to let you take in what is on the screen, but also just enough edits to show off as much as possible. The only time that this gets a little rougher are during some of the action scenes, when the edits can sometimes begin to get a little too fast. It's not bad, but I began to notice it. However, this was not often at all, so it did not detract from the film in any way. CGI. On par with the first two films. It is great, although not groundbreaking. It looks like a top-tier animated feature. However, there are some elements that really stood out to me, such as the fire animation, the powers of the dragons, the architecture of the Viking buildings, and the vibrant visuals of the hidden world. Overall, the CGI was really well done. Music. Just like with the first two films, the music here is fantastic. Great orchestral tracks with softer ones for the more emotional scenes, and creepier foreboding tracks when the villains are on screen. It wasn't really stand out, but it did help pull the whole film together. And let me just say that the final song that played, Once There Were Dragons, which was a mix of the classic franchise theme with some new twists, pushed the finale of the film from a solid end to the impactful, emotional, and glorious tear-jerking conclusion that it is. Direction. Dean DeBlois helmed this film just as he helmed the previous two, and it is clear that he loved making this trilogy. The progression between all three is natural, and the story feels like it is wholly complete. I am glad that he spent a handful of years between each film, 5 in the case of between 2 and 3, because each one feels pristine. Not only do both sequels bring you back into the world of Berk and its dragons, but each feels like it actually progresses the world, the characters, and the story. They are not sequels that feel like cash grabs, but 3 distinct acts to a beautiful story about 2 friends from different worlds, bonding, helping each other, and growing together. It is a timeless story, one that will go down through the generations, one of the all-time greatest animated film trilogies. I feel honored to have been able to experience all 3 chapters as they came out in theaters, and How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World is just the perfect end to this franchise. It is beautiful. My enjoyment. As you can probably guess, I adored this film. Being a fan of the first 2, I thought this ended the whole story perfectly. While I wasn't entirely surprised by the story, it still kept me engaged because I love these characters so much, and I was invested in seeing their story through to the end. And it was such a great payoff for me. The message was touching, and the film ended up bringing tears to my eyes. Happy tears. I was a little worried that this film might not stand up to its stellar predecessors, but it did not disappoint in the slightest, and I loved it. Recommendations. I recommend this film to every fan of the franchise. If you love Hiccup and Toothless and all the others, this is the most perfect conclusion to their arcs that you could have wished for. And even if you are unfamiliar with these characters, this is probably a film that you can find some enjoyment in. Although if that's the case, I doubt you'll be as impacted by it. I definitely recommend watching the first 2 films first. This is just a great animated adventure with heart that provides a beautiful story with a great message that can be wholly enjoyed by yourself, with your friends, or with your entire family. Thanks for watching, I hope you liked it. If you did, leave a like. If you want to add anything, feel free to comment. If you want to see more, please subscribe. I am Professor Kino, and I look forward to our next discussion.